Buenas para todos, hamdo ni kung kuzung no. Guau si Frank Rabon, Francisco Binaventi Rabon. People here consider me the founder of the CHamoru Dance. Well, let me explain to you the existence, the establishment, the recreation of CHamoru Dance. But before we get into that topic and that aspect, let me bring you back and let me give you a bit of history. Prior to the setting of the Gumas, there was no organized dance houses on the island that perpetuates CHamoru dance prior to 1983. Yet, when you look at all the Pacific Islands, there's all these dance houses that exist in the preservation of not only their language, but also their culture. And it's prevalent in Micronesia, Polynesia, or Melanesia. So what happened to Guam and the Northern Marianas? What really happened? Ask yourself that question. What really happened? What was happening? Well, when the Spanish were colonizing us, one of the practices that was really completely removed from our way of life is the CHamoru dance. So we were introduced to two types of dancing. Batsu, it's a Spanish waltz, it's a 3/4 timing, and also the solstice, the same thing. Then United States entered, and we started to listen to mainstream American music. So we started to listen to Patsy Cline and Skeeter Davis, Johnny Cash, and all this stuff. And we hear country, and that's the only thing that was being played over the radio. So we were inundated with a lot of these music, to the point where that was what we were singing. So we were introduced to mainstream American music, mostly country western. Not only that, we were also introduced to mainstream American dances, such as the jitterbug, the jerk, the twist. We were introduced to that, and we started to practice or do these dances whenever we come together in celebration, whether it be a fiesta, a wedding, what you call that, a baptismal, whatever. There are always things that are happening, and people will get up and dance. And that was CHamoru dance. Hallelujah. How true that is. And I bought into it because I was not taught anything else. And I bought into it. I said, okay, I guess this is my dance. I guess the Batsu is my dance. I guess the solstice is my dance. Okay? So now there's dances. Mind you, it did not mean that we didn't have dances. It did not mean that our people never danced prior to the colonization. It did not mean that our people did not celebrate. Hopefully you guys would understand that we did celebrate, and that the cha-cha and the jitterbug and the batsu and the twist, it's borrowed dances that were brought in by our colonizers, and we took them and adapted them into our way of life. Lo and behold, 1970, tourism began. Hotels started to appear in Tumon. The first group of hotels that stood up was the Guam Tokyo Hotel. It doesn't exist now. The Guam Taichi Hotel, which is now called the Fiesta Hotel. There's Guam Fujita Hotel. And then eventually Guam Reef and Hilton Hotel followed suit shortly after. That began the tourism industry. And when the tourism industry began, here we go again. Not only did we deal with colonization, but now we deal with misrepresentation. All those hotels that existed in Tumon were owned by Japanese. Japan had already a good influence or interaction with Hawaii. And lo and behold, what did the Japanese owners wanted to do with their hotel? Let's sell Guam as a mini Waikiki. Why don't we build a hotel, bring in the dancers from Honolulu, and tell the Japanese market that, hey, travel to Guam. It's cheaper. You're going to get the same things that you're going to see when you go to Waikiki. It's just cheaper and shorter. It only takes you 3 hours to get from Japan to Guam, whereas it's going to take you about maybe 7-8 hours to get from Japan to Hawaii. And it probably only costs you $300 to get to Guam. It may cost you about $1,000 to get to Japan. You do the math. Well, yeah, lo and behold, boom, here comes a Hawaiian group straight out of Honolulu, na Mele o Kaleo, owned by Tetu and his wife, Carol. And they were just fresh out of Honolulu circuit, and they were brought in, and they were performing at Guam Daiichi Hotel as well as Guam Tokyo Hotel. And they were doing nightly show. Well, 1971, I was a senior. And as a senior at JFK, I had enough credits to where all I needed to do was go half day. That means go in the morning and then I could work in the afternoon. I took advantage of that and I went and applied at Daiichi Hotel and I became a front desk clerk. So I was part-timing at Daiichi Hotel. And, I would go down there after school and then I would hear these drum beats and this chanting and this fanfare. And I'm saying, oh my God, what is that? That is very different. That doesn't sound like mainstream American music, So one night I snuck in to see what it was. And I saw this Namelio Kaleo performing Polynesian. They did Tahitian, they did Samoan, they did Maori, they did Hawaiian, they did the Kahiko and Awana. And I said, oh my God, it was so beautiful. And I asked myself, how come we never saw any of like that? How come we never grew up with those kind of things? How come we're busy doing the cha-cha and the batsu and the twist? That's when I started to think something's wrong with this picture. Well, it just so happened that one person from that group, that was 1971, decided at the end of her contract, decided to stay back on Guam. And when she stayed back on Guam, that person is Janelle Kaava. She's from Nanakuli in Hawaii. She opened up a studio in Totu, and we were her first students. She went around and she was asking, and it just so happened that there were several of us that was interested. We found it very interesting. So we started taking classes, and her intention was, there's more hotels that are going to be built, and I intend to be around to make a bid so I can bring a group in. So rather than bringing dancers from Hawaii and Tahiti, I'm going to train CHamoru people, train them how to dance Hawaiian and Tahitian, Maori and all that stuff, and then I'm going to bring them up, And that was her intention. So we learned, and sometimes we did shows outside, here and there. Not a lot, but just we learned a lot. And I enjoyed it because it was something very different. It was something just not cha-cha, not twist, not jerk. It was like telling a story, okay? So lo and behold, we became her students, and then all of a sudden, Hilton opened up. Hilton Hotel, and she put a bid in, and she was able to be awarded the contract. At that time, it was called the Micronesian Ballroom. That was the only aspect of Hilton. Right now, Hilton has 2 extensions, left and right. But the main lobby, Micronesian Ballroom, used to be right there. The minute you enter the main lobby, turn right, and the door's there. So we basically began the contract there in 1972. While we were on the contract, Janelle was kind of, curious. So because we were all CHamoros, I happened to be, she kind of considered me the more intellectual out of the rest of us, right? So she came to me and said, Frank, what do you CHamoros do? What is your dance? I said, the only thing that I know, Janelle, is the batsu and the sotis and twist and the cha-cha and the jerk. And she looked at me kind of cockeyed and she said, that's not CHamoru dance. Those are from the mainland and other places. I go, well, that's what I learned. That's what I grew up with. He goes, oh, no. I'm pretty sure your people chanted. I'm pretty sure your people celebrated. I'm pretty sure your people danced. And I said, well, I don't know, Janelle. I'm sorry. We were never taught that. Not even from home, She goes, well, Frank, something's wrong here. So she got me to teach her the batsu and the bailan na iguas and the bailan palito. And because she was on Guam, she wanted to honor the place that she was. So we incorporated those 3 aspects into our Uilani or Polynesian show. That was the title of our contract at at Hilton Hotel. That was 1972. And basically, that when she mentioned that to me, and after seeing the Daiichi Hotel show in 1971, it started, it started something in my mind, and started something very deep. And from that point on, it was like, okay, something's wrong here. There's a lot of missing pieces in this puzzle. And this missing piece, I need to find. I need to go and look for. So aside from my upbringing, my cultural upbringing and my language upbringing, okay, I continued to maintain that aspect in my life, but I wanted to know what happened before my two grandmothers were born. What happened before 1900? What happened before 1899 when the other one was born? I said, is that it? Did saboteurs bring us in? Whatever. Well, I started to question because, like I said, the whole time I was in high school, we were never introduced to anything about Gada or Taga or anything like that, or even the Laddistones. So I was oblivious. I was not knowledgeable about our history, about our people. 1983 has come around, and I took the time to formulate Guma Tautotano, 1983. And the reason why I wanted to formulate Guma Tautotano was for three purposes. I wanted to reestablish the CHamoru dance. I wanted to infiltrate the hotel industry and dispel the misrepresentation that was happening in the hotel industry, and at the same time, kind of empower our CHamoru people, the existence, the awareness that we existed prior to the military in the U.S. in 1898, prior to Salvatoris in 1668, and prior to Magellan in 1521. And then in 1984, I met Carlos Taitano, and this was because they were preparing for the Festival of Pacific Arts in New Caledonia. And he introduced me to Guaho Tautotano. That was a play that was written by Robert Underwood and himself, and they cooperated and they did some. So when he found out that I had this group and they were already dancers, and for me to come and assist them in choreographing some of the things, so I was brought in. Well, eventually that did not happen in 1984 because of civil unrest. The New Caledonia Festpac was canceled, and then the following year in July, Tahiti picked it up. So the 1984 Festival of Pacific Arts eventually went to Tahiti. So after the introduction to Carlos Taitano, I started to wean the Polynesian, and I started to incorporate the dances that I started to create and choreograph and add drum beats to it. I improvised. I started out with breadfruit leaves, covering the women, both the top and bottom, because the breadfruit tree grows abundantly on our island. I tried to use resources that basically was found on our island. I didn't want to use something that grew in Australia but never grows on Guam. So I started out with breadfruit leaves. I put the boys in the loincloth, the sadi, and that was our ancient. Of course, whenever I do the Spanish and the contemporary, I use the mestiza because that was the clothing then, and then the modern contact. And eventually, it stood on its own. And lo and behold, in 1987, Pacific Star Hotel opened up, and they wanted 100% CHamoru show, and boom, there we were. We were contracted at the Pacific Star Hotel in 1987. And it was we were with Jesse Baez and Ruby, and we did CHamoru culture. And of course, we augmented with the fire knife, which was something that they wanted, that the owners wanted to see. So that was incorporated, but everything else was the CHamoru culture. And it was a very well-attended show by the tourism industry. And we ended up having to do double shows at night, and we were there 7 nights a week. So it was a good run for a lot of the dancers. It allowed the dancers, the ones that were getting older, the ones that I had that were 15, 16, and eventually getting older, they found income being contracted at Pacific Star. And then they move on. And so the other ones, the up and coming ones, will eventually come in and replace. And it continued. It continued, and we continued with the hotels. We've danced professionally at Hyatt Regency, at Okura Hotel, Hilton Hotel, Guam Reef. Yeah, so those are some, and then we've also done contracts at Gifpago when it first was set up. So that's the life of Guma Tautotano. Most people think that I'm authenticating Chamorro dance as it was prior to Magellan Landing or even Salvatore's Landing. So no, I'm not here to authenticate Chamorro dance, or what you guys call prior to colonization. I'm here to create an awareness that we existed prior to colonization, and we did celebrate, and we did chant, and we did dance, and we did enjoy our way of life prior to the Western contact. But within Guma Tautotano itself, it wasn't all about dancing, because a lot of times I would have them interact with the elders. In the beginning of Guma Tautotano, there was 14 elders that were very strong in the Kantang Samarita. And I wanted the members to be exposed to that traditional practice. More so because the language is very vibrant in that particular practice, and I wanted them to hear the language. At that time, there wasn't that many members, and this was, mind you, this is in the 80s. There was maybe about 4 or 5 that were raised by the language. So they were fluent, but the rest were not fluent, although their parents were fluent, but the children weren't. They understood, but they couldn't speak. So we started to ingest that to the point where the reinforcement of the language, speaking of the language, was very much a part of what Tautotano does when they get together as a community base. So all those things, I introduced them to weaving, to types of weaving, even to carving pieces, and the traditional practices that the elders have. So they were not just dancers. They were exposed to other aspects of the Chamorro. So we were basically covering the holistic aspect of who we are as Chamorro people, our language and our culture. So now I'm at the point now that I've devoted 37 years now, from 1983. Come to 2023, it will be 40 years since I've embarked in this journey. And I tell you, the first 15 years of this journey, the criticism that even my own people gave to me was not very pleasant. And thank God that I had the strength. The sesu umano hulu sa afanaguzu si tao no, and behano gialum tao no the be ekong siya I manainata. Thank God I had that courage, and I would go into the jungles and visit our ancestral grounds and commune with our ancestors, because they were the ones who gave me the courage to continue. They're the ones who say, don't give up. And then aside from that, the leaders of other islands as well as countries, like the New Zealand leader, the Austronesian leaders, they kept encouraging me, don't give up. Because, when we first participated in the Festival of Pacific Arts in 1988, when I first brought Tautotano, a lot of the Pacific Islanders didn't even quite understand what Guam was. When we landed in Australia and we got off the plane, there was a lot of us that were dark-skinned. And the first thing we were greeted was, we didn't know that there were dark-skinned people in Guam. We thought it was just a military base. That was one misconception that kind of blew my mind when I stepped off that plane. And I came back and I said, wow, the world knows very little of who we are. And what they do know is that we have plenty power outages and a lot of snakes that are climbing the poles and killing the power. Okay, that was the biggest thing that everybody knows about us. Okay, now things are changing, and it took me to attend FESPAC in 1988, lead a Guam delegation, the first performance that we did that showcased the indigenous culture of the Chamorro people. And the Pacific Islanders were amazed to finally see something that they can relate to instead of listening to mainstream American music and watching ballet, because that was what was brought down in 1972. So, moving forward, I've been to, including Guam, I've been to 8 Festival of Pacific Arts. And the most rewarding thing that I received was in Western Samoa in 1996 when we came there and we opened up with our chanting and our ancient dances. And then the islanders came to me and goes, the Chamorros have finally arrived. When I heard that comment coming from the leaders of several of the Pacific Islands, I felt that wow, so my work that I've been doing is not in vain. Even if I'm not so much accepted on my island, but at least outside of the island, people were recognizing the fact that I was doing something that was relevant in the preservation of the Chamorro language and culture.
Love.